Okay, so hello everybody. Very nice that you joined us for this talk tonight. If we would not meet in the virtual space, we would have met in Innsbruck, Austria. So for our friends abroad, via SRAUM, the Design Forum Tirol. And we make a lecture series every year with very different point of views. And we're really happy to have Maral and her work here tonight. I will introduce her very shortly. Maral is a German-born designer with Iranian roots. She grew up in Hamburg. She graduated from the Muthesius School of Fine Arts with communication design. Then she worked for a while at the big agency Jung von Matt in Hamburg before she decided to continue with the master's study in Potsdam. And I hope I'm right, but I think at the point you were thinking about, or you were doing the master thesis, starting the master thesis, the revolution in the Iran was rising. So thousands of people were on the streets to protest against the presidential selection. And that was for you, so you had the intention to like kind of involve into this political debate in the country. I think your parents probably are from, or one of your parents. And so at the end, you wrote your master thesis with the title, I have looked at the Iranian Internet between freedom and isolation. So you got very deep into this issue, and I'm sure we will hear about that project later in the talk. Currently, Maral lives in London. She has been working for an NGO as a visual researcher. So her main focus as a designer is in information graphics. She's also the co-founder and creative director of a little creative agency called mechnisms. She's leading in London. She's also a founding member of the cyberfeminist collective Deeplab, sorry, I'm a bit nervous. So Deeplab is a collective of women, from different professions. So scientists, artists, journalists, information designers, hackers, engineers, all women, and they're doing like research projects. I think we'll hear about that as well. A very exciting thing. She's also a co-organizer of the DataVis conference Visualized, at least for several years, I think. And there would be much more to say, but I want to save time for Maral herself. So I just want to close with this. Maral Pourkazemi calls herself a design activist. So every work she does, she's doing, or she aims to do it. She aims to do responsible and purpose-driven design, so to say. So, and she also believes in design as a tool to change human behavior, if we can sum it up. But all about this will be in the lecture now. So I'm really very curious about her talk, and thank you very much, Maral, that you are with us. So before I hand the micro over to you, I would invite everybody to shut down the micros now and close the videos, or turn off the videos for the talk. We for sure will have time for questions afterwards. So you can also write in the chat if something comes to your mind during the talk, and then we will moderate this afterwards and leave enough time to ask Maral. Okay, thanks, Maral Pourkazemi. The stage is yours.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm now meant to share my screen. I'm going to do that. And share audio, technicals. Here we go. Let's play. And we're off. Do we see one screen with a little text on it? Can someone send me? Yeah. Oh, great, perfect. That was a really very nice introduction. Thank you very much for that. I feel like you could have just finished my talk, really. But I'll just go in a little bit more detail. I'll run you through some of my work that I've done in the past, or basically more the little journey of how I became this design activist, or how I came to believe of the design work that I do as responsibility driven or purpose driven design. And for that, really, we need to go back in time. I'm going to start in 2009. That was the year when the uprisings in Iran happened. I'll tell you about that a little more in a second. But it was also the year where I graduated with my BA from the Muthesius-Kunsthochschule in Kiel. Oh, I should mention something before I dive too far in. I have noticed anytime I preempt that I have terrible ADHD, my tangents are more acceptable. So here you go. Now you know. So I graduated from the Muthesius-Kunsthochschule in Kiel with my BA, working on a fictional campaign for Nike. It was about sneakers. I'm purposefully not showing you this work here, not because it's not something I'm proud of, but just because it's not something I don't do anymore. And so while I was working on this fictional Nike campaign for the sneaker that I loved so much, this thing in Iran kicked off. My parents are both Iranian. I grew up and was born in Iran myself. In Hamburg. That's a big mistake there. So I was born in Germany, so I didn't really have so much of a connection up until that point, other than going to Iran a couple of times in my life. But this was a pivotal point for me to like take a stance, have an opinion, learn a lot about the country that my parents come from, and about the heritage and culture of my background. And so the work that basically kicked off, the work that was just mentioned, the Iranian Internet between Freedom and Isolation, is the piece of work that I worked on in the years coming after 2009. But I was deep in my master's, and I couldn't really stop it. I was organizing protests in Hamburg, actually, with my dad and with lots of other Iranians. So while I was getting critiques from my professors, I always hustled them to actually hurry up and finish giving me their feedback so that I can rush back to Hamburg to keep being part of these protests and do my part to just show up, really. It got so deep that my dad and I actually got interviewed by a couple of news channels. So that, I don't know why really, but they just interviewed us about our relationship with Iran and what we were doing and all of that. And all of that during my studies and figuring out how to do this fictional Nike campaign, which, by the way, became super unimportant to me while all of this started happening. So this was the first time where really my career choices or my vision of who I would be in the future started cracking with like just being this person that's kind of cool, creative. It was starting to not be enough anymore. After you study, you're asked to get a little bit of work experience. So I went to Jung von Matt. I worked there for a very short time for, what was it? It was a 3 or 6 months practicum, an internship. I learned a lot there. Yeah, I learned a lot about the skills and sort of software and all of that, but the work that we kind of worked on was horrendous, right? Like, it's not the kind of stuff that I really wanted to do. So it was this one night, 33 hours in, like not going home, not eating enough, completely exhausted, working on McDonald's, trying to win McDonald's as a client, where I just banged my head on the table and I was like, I can't do this for the rest of my life. And all the while, this is in 2010 at this point, I just couldn't stop thinking about what was happening in Iran in 2009 and what was still like the ripples that kept on coming through since what had happened in Iran. So what actually happened in Iran? I think I saw a couple of Iranian names here. You all know, but for those that may have not seen what happened, I'm just going to give a little quick background. So in 2009, there was, could could I move to the next slide? Here we go. We had a presidential election. We had Ahmadinejad and gosh, I forgot his name. Mousavi. Here we go. The opposition. Ahmadinejad is the hardliner. Mousavi is the opposition, and these guys were running against each other. Both of them were, you know, not the best choices, but one is better than the other. The opposition was meant to be, you know, the sort of, I don't want to go as far as saying Biden of the Trump and Biden campaign, but he was carrying hope of trying to like make this hardliner political landscape a little bit less hardlined. And so people were following Mousavi a lot. Lots of protests happened as soon as the election results were published. People in the streets of Iran really thought that the election was rigged. You can see these are a couple of pictures of what had happened in the major cities in Iran. This was called the Green Movement. At that time, when the results were shared, the police and like all the authority arms and militias and all of them started taking to the streets as well. But that was only after the news agents and journalists from abroad were basically kicked out of the country to stop reporting about what was happening on the streets in Iran, which was basically an absolute brutal, violent show of abuse and killings and just oppression, like proper oppression, where people of our age, people that could be our friends or are our friends, were completely beaten up. Some of these people fatally so. The next image is a little bit triggering. It's very triggering actually, because this is one of the, so if you don't want to look into it, you can just look away and I'll tell you when to look back. This woman here is Neda. She was a student. Her death was recorded from two perspectives, which was a very poignant point in this whole movement, because we're not just seeing a movement, but we're seeing the internet being used in such a way that helped a movement when no news agents or news channels could report from it. So that was me, still working on this goddamn McDonald's pitch, thinking to myself that, yep, this is not what I want to do. I can see all of my colleagues that I actually like being rinsed and completely squeezed like lemons, but there's no tequila with it. It's nothing rewarding. I mean, not like tequila is anything rewarding, but it wasn't good. It wasn't rewarding or purpose driven. So this is what I kind of did after that, or the day after this pitch. I went called in sick for 3 days, put together an application for the master's studies in Potsdam at the University of Applied Sciences, and it was all about online privacy, censorship, security in Iran, and surprisingly so, I got and this sort of what was it called, application that I submitted was nothing designed. It was absolutely flimsy. It was a couple of pieces of paper put together in so like visually nothing appealing, but the content in it was and I couldn't do anything more than like putting together a couple of ideas around this topic, saying this is important. Someone needs to like look at how the internet was used and how these people are helping themselves in movements like this. Mind you that all of this happened before the Arab Spring, so really this was kind of a revolution in itself. I mean, it wasn't a revolution in Iran really, it was a movement, but it was a revolution on how the internet was used, and a complete new display of how oppression would trickle through to the rest of the world when there is something that is called the free flow of information. I was accepted to my own surprise. Didn't think that I would make it through. In Potsdam, the process of getting into your master's thesis is that you submit this proposal for a topic that you want to work on in the time that you're there, then you'll get invited to present the same idea. And at the same time, I had tried to apply with the same issue to my to the Matthias Kunsthochschule, where I first got my my bachelor. And for them, this topic was too political, which to me was a bit of a I don't know. It was quite a disappointment, to be honest, that an institution was able to say that, or to see this project in that sort of way. So that, you know, that led me back to Potsdam University, and I was very, very upfront to them. I said, I have no idea what I'm going to do with this, but I know that if I don't write about this, or if I don't do anything about this whole project, not the project, but what had happened in 2009 and onwards from there, to the people in Iran and in what their own internet is going to be forgotten in some way or another. So they accepted me, and I started doing my research. I wasn't I wasn't familiar with data visualization or information design at all at the time. I didn't know actually even that Potsdam is quite known for that. I just went in for it, and I started sort of taking apart the different layers that I could find. It was a very interesting process to get to connect with journalists, with activists around the world to try and peel the layers off, especially when you're doing a project that is about essentially a country that doesn't have any transparency. The whole system in Iran is arbitrary. Like, it's to get anything factual, anything that is hard data that you can rely on is absolutely not possible. So I had to like play around a lot with quantitative data and the little qualitative data that I could find. So in this is just a diagram of how I just peeled those layers apart. And the problem of not knowing, of not having enough quantitative data, I made that part of the story itself. I'll show you in a bit. And so that sort of peeling of layers became visual, or it started forming a narrative. If you look at the Net Info Iran first block that you can see there, that's sort of where the story begins. Actually, this will be better if I go through here. There we go. All the way to the left, this is where the story begins. This whole thing was never meant to be an online data project or information design project. It was meant to be in the space where you would go in front of it, you get blurred into it through its tapestry, and then start reading what's actually behind it. So the original piece of this is almost 6 meters by 2.5 meters large. And then, so basically how the story falls out is to just dissect how many people in Iran are actually connected to the internet. That's where this narrative begins. I'm not going to go too deep into detail, but just to come back to the problematic of not having actual concrete data that I can rely on, I basically made it part of the story to say, okay, sometimes the Iranian officials say they are, I don't know, they have 8% Facebook users from all the people that are online. And other times when it suits them, they bump up that number to say that Iran is well connected. In this case, and at that time, it was the best number was 22.8% of all internet users would be online. This whole thing was split in the rural area and the urban area. Back in those days, there would be no internet connection for those people that are in rural areas. So then we go from there, we go into the black, basically this black block represented everyone that was connected in Iran. Then you go further into it, and then you see, okay, from those that are inside Iran, that again, we're zooming into yet another black thick stroke, almost illustration actually of what this Iranian internet would feel like often described as the halal internet, which is, if you're not using circumvention tools, very slow, very draggy. This was all at the time. And so if you go further, we would then learn what the different circumvention tools, how they would work. This is also more of an information illustration to dive through how Tor would work and how VPNs would work. From there, we go into the blogosphere, the Iranian blogosphere that gained quite a lot of traction and popularity. And here, what I've done here is to slice them into. Actually, this piece was a collaboration, because what's happened here is that I was invited by this small media, this human rights organization in London, for them to help me to figure out who the top 100 blogs were and categorize them with me. Later on, they also hired me to keep working for them. I'm gonna have a little sip. Okay, so from here, from the blogosphere, now, you're getting from quite abstract all closer and closer to the people. So the question now arises, who are those people that are actually going online and circumventing the internet, the halal internet, and getting into trouble with authorities? This is not everyone, of course, but here I've drawn out 5 quite famous stories of people who got in trouble with the law and actually also were persecuted for what they were doing. Omid Mir Sayalfi, this is the guy that's in the middle. He was writing satirical poems and fictional stories about music and also politics. He was detained twice, tortured, and the second time he didn't actually survive. So that, this is tragic stories that keep happening in Iran. And then finally, where does the power actually come from? This is the power apparatus, the system of government inside of Iran. Back at that time, this would be the seats in parliament and who's controlling culture and or where the control of culture actually comes from. So yeah, that was quite intense. But when I graduated, what I did was to apply to speak about this project at Republica in Berlin. And after that, the piece just went off, and this was in early 2012. And because the piece is not made for the internet, it was an installation. Really, a friend of mine who's a filmmaker suggested that we should change something about it. We should try a different medium and see if it translates in the same ways. And so what we've done is to create a motion graphic around it, which I'm going to play. Let me know somehow if you can't hear the sound, but you should be able to.
It's fine.
People say the internet has made the world a smaller place. Internet access means access to information, and some people are pushing for free and open access to be considered a basic human right. We know that censorship happens in our backyard too, but one country that certainly doesn't allow a free flow of information is Iran. No one knows exactly how many Iranians have access to the internet. Estimates vary from between...
Sorry?
I only hear the sound.
You can't hear the sound?
I can't see the film. I don't think it's in my case. Is there someone else who can see the film?
I'm not really sure if it already started because I just saw writing coming up. So I don't know, is maybe the beginning of the film black and then...
okay.
Okay.
Yes, so I'll leave this out, and then what I will do is possibly just send out a link to this, or yeah. So let's take this out because this might just be a technical challenge right now. It works for me here, but
try it once more.
So essentially, yeah, we can try it one more time. Let's go. Here we go. It should start now.
Oh yeah.
People say the internet has made the world a smaller place. Internet
What?
access means access to information,
Yes.
and some people are pushing for free and open access to be considered a basic human right.
It works fine.
We know that censorship happens
Okay.
in our backyard too, but one country that certainly doesn't allow a free flow of information is Iran. No one knows exactly how many Iranians have access to the internet. Estimates vary from between 15 to 47%, depending on who you ask. For example, Iranian officials once declared that 17 million Iranians were on Facebook, then 2 weeks later reduced that figure to 6 million. Sometimes it suits the Iranian government to declare that Iran is well connected, and sometimes it doesn't. All we know for certain is that there are people online surfing through a filtered and censored internet. The Iranian government is threatening to build what they call a halal, or pure internet, and switch their users off from the World Wide Web entirely. Each user is under the watchful eye of the government. Each click, each website visit, each email sent, and each blog entry written is seen and recorded by the cyber police. Private households are limited to painfully slow connections. Service providers are forced to filter the web, making thousands of websites inaccessible. Some Iranians, however, use technologies to break free of the halal net, though none of the exit routes are entirely secure. Canada-based Hossein Darakhshon, who many call the Iranian blogfather, was the first person to provide a step-by-step guide to blogging in Farsi. Today, the Iranian blogosphere is one of the largest in the world. But whether bloggers are for or against the government, all run the risk of having their blogs filtered if they say the wrong thing. Major foreign hosts like WordPress or Blogspot are filtered, yet bloggers inside Iran still choose these platforms because the government has full control over all blogs and websites hosted within the country. Iran has started a soft war against users who refuse to play by the rules. Iran's new cybercrimes law is vague and unreasonable and is being used to inflict harsh punishments on computer users. Omid Mirsayofi was the first Iranian blogger to die in prison. He blogged about music and wrote satirical poems and stories. His is just one of many cases. Hossein Darakhshon was accused of being a spy and imprisoned for 20 years while visiting his family. Because it only takes a few clicks to become a dissident, Iran is full of accidental activists who are caught up in the crossfire of the soft war.
Oof, that still makes me quite emotional anytime I watch it, especially after a long time of not watching it. So yeah, so this piece was another collaboration that happened off the back of the static piece with Florian Köhne, who is a really incredible filmmaker. Bronwyn Robertson, who's wrote the script to this, and then we got this amazing narrator involved as well. This whole thing took a life of its own entirely. This piece about the censorship and oppression in Iran really brought me on a lot of stages and also opened so many opportunities for me, which is absolutely insane. Apart from, that was a side product of, or just a side effect of actually being able to share the story with as many people as possible. I managed to get to London because of this organization that I mentioned, Small Media, who helped me put the piece that was basically the most quantitative data that was available for this project to organize all of that. They are called Small Media. They at the time were focusing a lot on human rights related issues just inside of Iran. Their work at the time, when I joined, they didn't have any designers there. All they did was write reports and just write reports, pages and pages and pages, hundreds of pages of reports for delegates, for human rights lawyers, for all sorts of really important people who do really important stuff. But it turns out a lot of these people also don't really read them, even if it's, most of the time they read just an abstract, if at all. So they kind of changed ship with me on board. Really, we started building a design team there. We started looking at all of the reports, whether it's LGBT, how the LGBT community uses the internet, or how the hardliners were using Twitter in particular. We had lots of reports from actual UN delegates that we were able to put into visual reports, helping them make decisions or understand things a lot quicker. So that's when a lot of data viz and information design came together. And then in the same year, in 2012, I visited a lot of stages to speak about this project, which was exactly, it was absolutely unexpected for me. I didn't really understand how it snowballed so quick, but I really found that very important, and it made me feel like I've done the right choice, not staying with McDonald's, but actually, sorry, Jungfernmatt and McDonald's, which, by the way, that pitch was lost. So those 33 hours, not like I would ever get them back again, but they were gone forever. So this stage that you're seeing here is a stage at Visualized in New York, where it was the last talk in 2012 that I attended or spoke at. It was also the year when Hurricane Sandy hit New York, so this conference nearly, which was the first of its series, nearly was blown anyways. But this one was very particularly special to me because the audience was extremely open and not just there to, like, I don't know, sometimes you go to conferences and people are just there because they have to be there and they don't actually want to connect, or all sorts of strange reasons. But like at this conference, there's a lot of connection going on. A lot of really important stories were told through data design and storytelling. And that's sort of when I set foot into the data design scene, so much so that I actually ended up becoming the co-organizer or co-host of Visualize from that moment onwards until the last event, which was about 4 or 5 years after this date. I don't know if I can show you another video, but I'm just going to stop. I'm not going to show you this video. This was just to show you a little bit of the vibe that was going on there. So I'm going to go through it. I met Eric there, with whom I organized conferences in New York, in Milan, in Berlin, in London, in DC. So the two of us basically brought together a global data design and storytelling community that would not just make what we call data porn, but actually tell very, very important stories that have to be told visually and in more easier to understand ways than words ever could. Peter Kronokrack, who's also a speaker and a good friend of mine now since then, he said something really nice, really important actually about this. He said, words are just not sufficient enough anymore. And this is a little outtake of the event in London. This was the first event where we actually had a little workshop off the back of that. And from that workshop, so this is how sort of nurturing this environment has been. Off the back of this workshop, an offspring came to life. This offspring is now called Data for Change. And these guys are now doing exactly all of what we wish to do all the time, working with human rights organizations, bringing together developers, designers, scientists, all sorts of creative people, creative and talented and absolutely brilliant people together into one space in a condensed amount of time to try and tackle those issues that these human rights organizations have been working on for years in data visualization projects, mainly interactive ones. So I invite everyone to definitely check Data for Change out. They often do a lot of sprints all around the world now. It's all they're all not self-funded, but there's no sort of ulterior motive behind this. It's all very kosher. It's really a phenomenal community behind that too. So this was what's happened with Visualized. And then during that time again, during those years working on Visualized, I got invited to a residency called Deeplab, the first of its kind in Pittsburgh at the Studio of Creative Inquiry at the Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh. All I got was this really strange email from someone I actually really admired, who's an artist. Her name is Adi Wagenknecht. And she said, I really admire your work, blah, blah. I want you to come to Pittsburgh. All expenses and flights and all of that is covered. Are you in? And you're getting paid for it too. So I was just in front of my inbox wondering, okay, you're not telling me what this is about. You're not telling me what's going on, but I know your work. So I'm just going to have to like not ask too many more questions and just say yes. So this is a little picture of us, of a lot of us at the studio working together for these 7 very intense days. Yeah, so basically the background of Deeplab, I should tell you guys, is trying to, it was basically off of the back of all of these, I'm going to call them boys club residencies that were basically mainly white boys coming together, creating really cool shit. So Deeplab was kind of an answer to that, to say, okay, enough of that. We want to bring together a lot of amazing female identifying individuals, and here we are. So that was really, really cool. Here we go. This is parts of a different presentation. I just could not put them in here. We got together in Pittsburgh. It was, like I said, 7 long days that felt very short, but we produced so much. Although when we came together first, and when I walked into the room, I didn't know why I was there. Still to that point, I was just picked up from the airport, brought there, and walked into, everyone was like kind of doing something. And I was like, okay, so what's the deal? What are we doing? So the way that I really learned to appreciate Deeplab is that there is a sense of anarchy. So there's not really a lot of structure going on there, but it doesn't matter, because what has happened was that people would gravitate, these individuals would start gravitating towards each other. We all knew that all of us were there because in some way or another, we care about online security, privacy, and offline security and privacy as well. So those were the anchors that brought us together. In those 7 days, we produced a lot of what's it called, essays that came together in a book. We produced a film about the InfoSec, and whoops, now it doesn't keep going. That was us working at around, I think, 3 a.m. It was fun. It wasn't like the McDonald's pitch at all. It was also around the time where the CIA torture report came out. So we also created like a new format of basically churning out ideas, which we called speed projects. We didn't spend a lot of time on them, but we were like, okay, so we've got this torture report that's come out right now. Sometimes we just need to see what actually this means, right? Someone reads an article about the torture report and it's like, oh, the torture report is out. But then when you go through it and you see that almost like quite a significant part of it is blacked out, even that censorship in that report was quite fascinating to us. So just as a speed project, which only took us about an hour, was to just print out all of these things, plaster half of the university full with it, to see what happens. And it happened so that one of the professors actually very angrily pulled all of them off the walls. He happened to be from Iran. He happened to teach, I think, classical music or some like musical thing there. And we heard that his reasoning for pulling that off the wall was that he has left Iran to actually not be faced with that sort of stuff anymore. So it actually, on a personal level, seems to have triggered him quite a lot. We continued on the theme of censorship. I don't know if this still happens, but probably does. The culture ministry in Iran has this weird thing. I think it is a culture. So basically, if you send magazines to Iran or anything to Iran, they might open your parcels and they will check what's in there. If there's a magazine with like these kind of images, like this Versace ad, they will just take a Sharpie and black out the bits that could potentially arouse you. Knees and, you know, something that is, I don't even think that you would see anything there. And then we took those shapes out and made them wearable censorship. This was also a very short speed project. And then Ingrid Burrington, she worked on her book that is called Networks of New York, where she basically figured out where the internet is and physical spaces under the street in New York, figured out what these visual languages on the asphalt, on the sidewalks, actually what they all mean. When we met later on in New York for another residency, she took attendees of our exhibition on network walks through the city. These are a couple more things that we did. So after the first residency, surprise, surprise, there was a little bit of a shitstorm online, a little bit of turmoil that we triggered as the collective for some strange reason. People were a little bit, there were a couple of articles that said to us that we aren't diverse enough. And without talking to any of us, without saying they were accusing us to not be LGBTQ, POC plus enough for them. When, it just feels like one of those initiatives, again, where women or female identifying people would be attacked for no reason. Because at the same time, we would get messages from the boys club section of the new media arts community saying, oh, how cool, I wish I was a woman so that I could participate at Deeplab, where all they do is participate in these super cool residencies where women aren't actually really considered as participants. So obviously that wasn't the only time where we met, and myself and some others of the collective received some apology emails from some of these people that have written these kind of accusations about Deeplab. It got to the point where some people actually had to, come out as gay or whatever, to basically make a point for us and say, only because we don't say we're this or that doesn't mean that we're not. Like, by us coming out to say this online to you so that you stop attacking this group, or that you kind of get off of your high horse and actually see through the obvious, is that they are putting themselves in danger by actually coming out online because they come from different parts. I myself wasn't really clear about my own reality at that point, so it was it was quite of a tense time. Anyways, we meet again. We went to New York and we invited, the whole concept of Deeplab is to, anytime we meet again, we'll invite a lot more members, a lot more new people. So we invited a bunch of new people, came together and produced a lot more work, new work that was this time in a public facing environment. I think if this is a video, it should not. This is not a video, it just looks like one. Permission to Fail was a drone painting piece that was made by Adi and a couple others of the group. This space is the New Museum New York space in the context of Idea City. So it was a festival in New York that we were participating at. Myself and Kate Crawford, we worked together on a series of not posters, but like quite big pieces that would put certain tech culture related statements into a binary statement. We were working a lot along the lines of Jenny Holz's truism statements as well. So we took quite a lot of inspiration from her. So these are the 9 questions, and the way that we wanted people to interact with this in the space was to use sticky notes and put them anywhere, whether it's in the box or outside the box. That was up to them. At the end of the week, and unfortunately we haven't got that documented, these really huge pieces were actually some really interesting visual tapestries. Metadata is black magic. Real-time data is a convenient mess. So it's all like a commentary on this tech culture that isn't really a culture. So this, again, these kind of things always surprise me, but suddenly this piece is exhibited at the V&A, which was pretty cool, but also, yeah. This was at the Artificially Intelligent exhibition. And then it toured other places in the world here. You can see a little bit of what people do. But some people just went completely different corners of depending on what question they were responding to, they put their stickies wherever, really. New York was really, really exhausting because we didn't have 7 days, but we had only, 3 or 4 days, and we produced a hell lot more work, lecture series and talks. You can see sort of this, I sometimes like to show this.
Big data aggregation, security, and themes of anonymity.
Everyone has a different profession. There are researchers, there are writers, there are designers, there are artists. But this topic about censorship, surveillance, and privacy, that is the knot that got us together.
I think Deeplab, above all, is an extraordinary group of women. We share a feminist politics. We share an interest in how do we make the world better? How do we actually challenge the kinds of norms that we see around technology and surveillance and data collection?
That's really interesting, for people who don't know each other to stay together for a week and create something. Everyone brings a different set of energies to the table.
So I was really interested in developing kind of a female crew and having like my female group that identified with me in terms of research topics, humor, and kind of finding someone other than myself to really challenge ideas and hope that I can also do the same for their ideas.
I'm going to stop that there. Basically, the point was just to show you how exhausted we all looked while being there. We met another time, just quite recently. This time, for the first time in the UK, at the York Mediale, we were invited to produce a piece. We created a live performance that we called "Can You Die If You Don't Exist?" This is a list of, what we've done during this residency was to look at something that is known as the list. It's a list of 34,361 lines of data in a just regular spreadsheet, where you would find out about on each line of the spreadsheet, you will learn about the life of a human who has died under circumstances that could have been avoided on their way to finding refuge in Europe. And so a lot of this list was actually under the column where a name would come under. There was the word unknown. I think it was 96% of people on this list were unknown with their name. Different to like other sorts of design works, you don't always have to make a data visualization, a classic data with an interactive thing, or like something that just is more of the norm kind of thing. We opted in for projecting this kind of visual onto one of the city walls in York and read every single line that you can that is on this list out without sitting down, without taking a break. This was performed by one of the latest members, Tamara Almashuk, who's a fine artist, who herself during the residency that we had in York was not allowed to leave Saudi, or she wasn't allowed to actually enter the UK. So she herself also had some visa issues, and is also the founder of the collective called the Visa Collective. So it's all very close to the skin, close to the bone. This is a little excerpt of what had happened during that residency.
One man, Africa. One died off coast of Tripoli after Libyan Coast Guard banned NGO ships from approaching. 3 missing, 114 rescued. No name. One man, 25 plus. Sub-Saharan Africa. Maroun Adeba. Boy, 2. Iraq. Froze to death in refrigerated truck while trying to reach Greece from Turkey. Basil Adeba. Boy, 4. Iraq. Froze to death in refrigerated truck while trying to reach Greece from Turkey. Malut Rozga. Boy, 3. Iraq. froze to death in refrigerated truck while trying to reach Greece from Turkey. J. Danielle, pregnant woman, Algeria, suicide, hanged herself at police station while detained in the Spanish enclave of Ceuta. No name, boy, Nigeria, stowaway, froze to death in airplane wheelbay during flight from Nigeria to London. Man, 26, Algeria, suicide, hanged himself in detention center in Denmark 2 days after interview with Algerian consulate.
So this continued for 10.5 hours. You can imagine how just absolutely shattering this kind of storytelling was for us, or even for obviously for the people who have gone through it. But this was the least that we could have done to memorize or commemorate everyone that had lost a life there, and to pay them some sort of respect that they never received, or they haven't received, at least in the last part of their existence. And again, this has to do with freedom and just with the topic of freedom under all of the things that we brought all of us together. So it doesn't always have to do with the internet itself, but it's obviously also with away from keyboard life, right? So Deeplab in itself was an amazing, is still going on, but it's going from residency to residency. So whenever we get an invitation somewhere, or whenever we are able to actually get some funds together, we organize something, we do something, we come together. So if anyone wants us to do something, holler at us. We would love to come back together in some way or another soon. But what was really interesting was when you step into a room with women that are so absolutely admirable. They are people that you follow on social media, that their work that you're absolutely fascinated by, and they're suddenly in the room with you, and everyone feels the same about each other. So that imposter syndrome, or the sort of dynamic that you would get there, it's very humbling. But when we get over that sort of imposter feeling, it's opening up a lot of honest work, a lot of connection as well, which I don't think in a not all female or all female identifying environment we'd be able to feel with this extreme honesty. So if anyone wants to look us up, there's some social links there on the website. So that was Deeplab, and so I think I mentioned it once before that there was a time where, when we went through that shitstorm after our first residency. During that time, I was coming to terms with my own sexuality. Turns out I'm gay. I didn't realize for most of my life, but here I am, and it was very hard for me to get through the hardship of it at the time. So I couldn't come out in public on Twitter, like during all of that crap that was happening online, because I thought that me as an Iranian with Iranian parents, like being gay, that's so against what my actual storyline is meant to be. But once I worked through that, and once luckily all of this had a happy, like all this coming out had a happy ending, something new happened for me. It's like a new anchor in my not only personal life but also professional life sort of change. So it's not just online privacy, censorship, security, and freedom that we're talking about. Sorry, freedom is a new piece that came onto this list of things that I really, really care about. But that came only after, became more obvious after coming out. And it's not only in Iran, but in everything and everywhere. So all these things like bring us together. So essentially, I want to like throw this back, because all of this actually started from that McDonald's pitch at the agency. So and then that Iranian internet piece. A lot of other projects, not all of them I will be able to talk about today, but one more that I want to run through is the recent thing that we've a couple of friends of mine have started, and that thing is called Mad Thing. So like all of these side hustles are happening now. We've started a little agency, not agency but creative studio, or we like to call it a creative ensemble. MAD stands for Media, Arts, Digital, and Design Things. And this is a little intimidating picture of us all in our old studio, which we unfortunately lost to COVID. The stuff that we do as this collective, you see, we are mainly female identifying. And then yet again, another thing happens. One of the founders of MadSing comes out as trans. So we learn a little bit more about an existence that we thought we know enough about, but we haven't been close enough with to actually understand it fully, or like to understand it better, let's say. So our mission to incubate female identifying talents and to empower Women X has expanded to also actually be a little bit more inclusive, or to not just have a almost, it feels now like pigeonholing yourself in just Women X, which, by the way, at this point in time, is again has become a very loaded and confusing term for what's meant to be an inclusive term, excuse me, for women of all sexualities and identities, sexual identities. We now have also expanded that to being more inclusive to trans-led grassroots as well. All of this, like one of the first initiatives that we had started was called Clearing Space. It was led by Tamara, who was the performer of the Can You Die If You Don't Exist project. This is where she brought together a couple of international brown artists, like all Women X people, came together for a residency in our studio space for a couple of days. We're now going quite like sideways. Like we're not only am I ADHD, but my co-founders are also ADHD. So our work is completely ADHD. So we're kind of like going into all sorts of fields where we think we need to create safe spaces. So it's not just data visualization or storytelling, but also like for us, everything is kind of political, even going out to dance, like or you know, going out for a night out. So we created our own that triggered quite a lot of, again, turmoil with the male, with potential male audiences who kind of question us, why are you doing a techno night just for women? That's another whole story that if anyone interested, I can give answers to. But then we also produce apps, and oh, this one has splits down. Let's just watch this quickly.
You know, we should go out and celebrate this later. The meeting.
All right, I'm gonna go back here because that didn't make a lot of sense. So we do nights out. We produce and develop apps to tackle sexual harassment and ill corporate culture to help create safer spaces, not just on dance floors or at conferences, but also in the wider space where people are meant to work together. This was before the pandemic, of course. Now let me just see what else there is. Yes, I think we're coming pretty much to the end of my talk. There we go. Yeah, that's sort of to wrap this up. I think anything that I touched, and now I can say we touch as like a couple different collectives. None of it has to do with it's not. It doesn't feel like junk, and nothing that we do feels like adding to the vacuous noise that's happening all around the world. Like even our social media, our own social media is absolutely rubbish because we just don't want to work with the algorithms so that we can have some sort of popularity, because it's not about popularity for us. It is for us about impact, and however small or big the work that we do is. Oftentimes we can see something or see someone or like trigger conversations and make people ask very interesting questions, because that interesting questions that you can trigger through a certain piece of work, even the confrontations with Deeplab, the shitstorm, or like even that, all of that is very important to happen, and all of that needed to happen for education to take place. Yeah, I think that wraps it up pretty much. Like this is why I reckon I call myself a design activist. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maral. I just have to turn my video and micro on, and let's see that we stop your screen sharing so that we can see each other. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, fine. Here we are.
Okay.
So from my side, really, thank you very much for this extremely interesting talk. I apologize for that some of the videos haven't been that fluid. They couldn't be, but that's the thing with the Zoom talk. So I think that, yeah, we have to accept that. I think we
that was a risk.
Yeah, we are used to that, so don't worry at all. I think we got the point.
Okay.
I'm really kind of impressed how you expand your role as a designer to so many areas, so to a political discussion, to even to the organizer of a rave event or whatever. So if I got that right, yeah. So it also shows that that we define our roles as designers by ourselves, and we are free to expand that how far we want. And so, if everybody is with me now, I think we want to start with some questioning, and I'm sure there are some questions. If there's anybody who want to be the first, please feel free to turn on your micro or to write in the chat to ask Maral something to her work.
I will have a couple of questions, so I don't know if I should start. Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. Perhaps we have kind of the same, some of us. Please.
Well, let me start with the more general questions. So my first question would be, what are the biggest challenges in your work?
Oh, that's a good question. The first thing that just popped to mind was making a living off of it. Because people, I'll tell you one example that we did during the first lockdown. We repurposed that sexual harassment app to be a COVID safety tracking app that you could, and we've just recently read it read an article on The Guardian that said if only a technology like this had existed, that would allow people to whistleblow wherever around, like in shops or wherever people aren't adhering to these guidelines. If we only had that data, we wouldn't have a second variant. When we read that, we all like we sank to the ground. It was horrendous because we have tried to get funding for it during this time when, you know, during the first lockdown, where it felt like for technology initiatives like this, there is like money just flying through the air, but we weren't able to get any of that. So sometimes it just feels like our means to actually do a huger and much bigger impact is limited by capitalistic intentions, because this kind of thing, we even called it Robin Good. We didn't want it to make money. We wanted it to be for the people, by the people, to give power back to them when, excuse me, in this situation, everyone just felt so hopeless. So yeah, I think not just making a living, but actually making some of, you know, we've got a catalog of things that we would like to kick off, but we just don't know how to do it without the means to it. And that is a very real challenge for us.
Sorry, I'm a little bit nervous in this online setting as well. I just wanted to say that I really appreciated your talk and thank you for sharing your personal details. I'm just like so involved with the article and kind of.
Oh, thank you so much.
It was definitely very inspiring and very enlightening. So you also told a little bit about the collective feedback that you got, but I'm also interested, like, what feedback did you get for your own work? Was there also negative feedback? Or did you ever receive any threats, or yeah?
I wanted to ask the same, especially for the Iranian internet things. You get problems with it.
So there's this one thing that happened that was quite interesting. I just don't know where to classify this. It was after I published it, maybe a year or two after the thing was circulating on the web, I got an invitation to be the juror of an Iranian infographics tournament in Tehran, I got this sent via email. You know, like I started doing this thesis and I put it out into the world, and my parents and family were actually terrified because they were like, okay, so, you know, something could happen to you. You don't know because you don't know anything. And I just kept saying to them, okay, I get it, but at the same time, I'm just one small designer that's done one, you know, in the grand scheme of things, pretty small project. But with the Iranian authorities, you just never know. So I actually thought I showed this invitation to my family, and they all agreed that this might be actually me luring me into the country, trying to like get me into the borders, and making it very difficult for me to leave. It's not. I don't want to, for security reasons, I won't name drop. This kind of thing has happened to some people that I know. So they have been taken like on a holiday trip to Iran. They have not been able to leave the country because of the kind of work that they were doing. So however small they were as well, so they are also not very known journalists or like professionals in the grand scheme of things. But Iranian authorities, for some reason, they really just know a lot of things. They've got a blacklist of whatever people they might deem as a risk to their political system. So yeah, that was the only time where I felt a little bit uneasy. And then this other time when I went to present my work in Beirut, which is also where headquarters of Hezbollah are, who are very funded by the Iranian officials. And I didn't tell my family that I went. So I went to kind of like called them from Starbucks in Beirut. I said, hey, I'm in Starbucks. I'm with my boss, and I'm here with an architect. I can't speak right now. All of that was true, but I didn't tell them that I was in Beirut until I got back. And so basically, like I think there's a couple of moments where I caused some terror to some people, so to my family, because of the work that I've done and because of the territories that I was able to visit. Yeah, but that's that. But other threats or like challenges that were, I think, a little bit unsustained were in regards to Deeplab and that coup d'etat events that we run every now and then, where you know, we as women suddenly become the educators of why is it okay to exist in this shape and form, these kind of events. That's that.
Okay, thank you. I still have a couple of questions, but I don't like. I would like to give others the turn first, and then maybe.
Perhaps there's someone else who has something to ask. All really full of information. Anita, you look like.
Yeah, just.
For your micro, yeah.
Yeah, it's on. Okay. Yeah, hello. Yeah, thank you very much for your lecture. It was really very, very interesting and very motivating. I have a question. I didn't understand it quite well. I think you applied something else first at the Kunsthochschule, Muthesius Kunsthochschule. You are told that you applied with another theme, which was with another topic, which was too political for them. Which was
it was the same project. It was the Iranian internet project, where at that point I didn't know what shape and form it would take on. And it got to the point where the professors, like I was, if I can say that about myself, like professors and we got along very well. So I was a very hardworking student at the time. So it wasn't because they didn't like me personally, didn't like my work ethics or my outcomes so much. It was more that actually the subject that I had suggested that I wanted to work on, and by the way, the Muthesius Kunsthochschule doesn't require a topic to start your master's. So I said, I have a vision, I want to do this, can you support me with this? And they said, no, if you want to do it here, let's just do something, you know, interface design, let's do something, you know, something more nondescript. You know, that's, having said that, my bachelor time, like I really, really adored working or like studying there, but that rejection, not because it was a rejection, but it was from an institution, it just felt like a kick in the teeth. I did have my relationship with those professors continued, and like we're all obviously on good terms, and I know for a fact that they do kick themselves that they haven't accepted me for this project, because as it was a dissertation. And Potsdam is quite known for their database. Like for me, it's a factory of people that just Moritz Stefana and like all sorts of people are coming from there. And I didn't know that either. It's kind of like a good flagship work for them as well, which Maltese obviously missed out on.
So, is it published, the work about the Iranian halal internet?
Yeah, you can find it online.
Ah, okay, that's great.
Yes.
So am I allowed to mention it in my lecture about information design I have next week?
Of course.
For university.
Yeah.
It's a very good best practice example with content.
Ah.
I also thought,
yeah, of course,
to show it to students. Yeah. I would have.
This is very interesting because.
Yeah. Please.
This is very interesting because for me, this has become such an old and at this point quite outdated project when it comes to the content of it. But it's still so, it's still in some way it managed to manifest itself as a good way of visual storytelling and an important story. There's still an important and relevant story. I find that quite humbling. Actually.
It's great. It's also visually, not only the content, but this is striking that you see a carpet and oriental carpet. It's really great. For you, you are used to it already. You saw it for years, probably, but we saw it for a time. So it's really very good.
Monica, are you guys familiar with Art and Com? There's a company in Berlin. It's called Art and Communication, Art and Com. Yeah. Back in the day, and may she rest in absolute peace, Monica, I think her name is Kerner, she passed away during my studies there, very like at a very young age, but she was a tutor and professor at the university. She actually suggested I should make this an actual carpet. I should make this a rug.
Wow, that's cool.
Which that would have been a cool idea.
We actually had Joachim Sauter in the Weißraum some years ago from Art and Com. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
I would have one very technical question concerning this carpet Anita mentioned. Why did you keep it in black and white? But perhaps all the designers say, of course, that's the only way. But you dispense the opportunity to use color to probably make it clearer or whatever. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's let me try and remember this. First of all, I think I was trying to, if I had introduced color, I would have had an absolute rainbow there. And that would have like taken away, actually, the color would have taken over from the overall aesthetic, let's say. And I think the thing is that this is not a piece that was meant to be understood from afar. It's meant to be a trick. Its beauty is meant to just lure you in and want you to have a look at this until when you then engage with it, you only understand what this thing is about. And I really still believe that if you can turn something around that works in black and white, you could just keep it that way. You could just keep it in grayscale. Color was also conceptually not really a part in this. I was helping myself to the shapes of Islamic architecture, Iranian architecture, rugs, carpets, art, calligraphy. I was taking all of that in, and most of it, except the palaces and like the architecture itself, which is very, has got its own color scheme. But I chose not to go down that route. It would have made it actually a lot more difficult to read.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's understandable. Mm-hmm. I would also have one other question, perhaps if I'm not too dominant, so everybody else come in, please. No, about Deeplab. Actually, we had Adi Wagenknecht in Innsbruck 2 years ago or 3 at an international art event. I remember seeing the announcement.
Yeah, she lives there.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Yeah, I know.
But
we're really good friends.
Yeah. Okay. Not really. No, what I wanted to ask is, you call yourself a cyber-feminist network, or that's what's written in the net. I don't know, in the internet. Perhaps you don't like it. I wanted to know: is there an aspect about all this digital culture, discussing about all this, discussing about data misuse, surveillance, privacy, and so on, which is really focused on women, or which you are looking on from a different point of view, being a feminist collective?
Yeah, so there are a couple of lectures and a couple of like early days collectives in the beginnings of the internet. I think most, I don't want to say something that's wrong, but most of that sort of information is actually in our book. The cyberfeminism part, that's actually borrowed from a collective that is much older than ours and from the early days of the internet. I think like if I remember correctly, the internet was also sort of invented, or the computer was invented by a woman. So we wanted to just like bring this back sort of and like take space in this just everywhere male dominated world. I think that's the best answer I can give to you right now about this. I think the other part of it was just the simple act of women coming together that feels so radical to too many people. And us having to explain ourselves to that. So yeah.
Yeah, I completely follow this, because all this tech scene is a very male-dominated scene. So that's for sure
absolutely
a real big thing to bring that back in women's sphere. Thank you.
I actually have a question. Because you mentioned that the tech scene is very male dominated. I noticed that actually the database scene has a lot of very prominent females and like spearheaded by females. I mean, Amanda Cox, Georgia Lupi, Minio Nuha, a lot of really, really great people doing really great work. And I was wondering if you have a take on that.
Yes, I do. It's really good work, and it speaks to our community. I gave my 2 pennies about this whole topic at the podcast from Robert Stefana. Can't recall the name. This must be the time of the day or the ADHD. So basically, my comment to that was, yes, we are doing really good at support, especially the men are really doing quite good work in putting women onto a platform, yet that still has to continue, and yet we have to put women into leadership positions in those environments anyways. But I think the next big thing to do is to make our scene accessible to people of color. And like many other scenes, that's sort of like the biggest, I don't know why this seems to be the biggest challenge, but there is this, one of our conferences with Visualize, I had a topic, I had brought on, it was Valentina, Zach Lieberman, and somebody else so long ago, I can't remember. But basically, we talked about this issue, and we talked about accessibility and how to make a program inviting to other people, to people that are not just like you. This is all design. This has to do with writing, with the language you write. It has to do with the pages you design. Yeah, that's sort of like the next biggest challenge, really, is to make it even more accessible.
Okay.
I hope that was a good enough answer. I do tend to ramble sometimes. I don't know when to stop.
Okay, let me see if there's something in the chat. No? Someone else being curious about any topics?
Oh, is the sexual assault app still available? This is, I can't pronounce your name correctly. I'm going to call you T. That app, oh my God. Is this live on Facebook right now? Yeah, it is, right?
Yes.
Okay, I can't, this like a lot of, okay. I'm going to have to tell the story around this application in such a way that I don't put myself into trouble, because there is a backstory to this. Okay. Or this app is not in its shape and form available at the moment, because the client that we worked in during that time stopped paying us to complete the project, but was almost ready to sell on this project to a large corporation and take away the intellectual property from us. I'm not going to name drop because that's going to be get me into trouble. So what happened then? Because gosh, this was crazy. Because essentially, what had happened is that a white cis male came to a all female at that point in time, female identifying collective to work on a sexual harassment or bullying and misconduct sort of platform software, develops that whole thing. The whole the business plan and this business model was all written out by us, and then bullies and intimidates this specific collective, our collective, with threatening letters from his own legal team suddenly. So it's basically because we have pulled that this app away from his hands because we were in the right, he has not paid us. He then started doing exactly the thing that we were trying to tackle with this app. He was starting to harass us. He was starting to intimidate every single one of the team, trying to break our collective apart. And this is, by the way, the first time I'm talking in public about this project. We're just waiting for the right moment in time to actually go live with it. So the next time Me Too keeps getting a wave up, we're going to contribute to that hashtag with it. But we're using something like that technology or all the learnings that we had from this application that we built to try and tackle COVID or a different kind of thing. We didn't get funding for that either. So at the moment, this software is catching dust on our servers, which is really annoying.
So is there a chance that it will become reality still, or do you think it's?
Yeah, there's a chance for it needs to become a reality. It's very important for it to become a reality. It's just a matter of funding at the moment, and we, as a collective, do not really we don't opt in for this Silicon Valley startup culture thing because that is we can't do it. We don't condone to that sort of work-life balance. So for us, it's a matter of finding the right sort of source of funding for this so that we can work freely on this and do the right thing.
I see.
Because it's not, when we talk about responsible design, for us, it goes beyond just the skin of things. It goes to the bones of things. So where the money would come from really matters, especially, where the funding would come from. If we think about if this app would have come out from this client specifically, who seems to actually not believe in the stuff that he's putting out in the world, but actually just monetizing off the back of women's harassment, then we're actually lucky that this happened, that we didn't give this man any more fortune through it.
Okay, so I would like to thank you, Maral, for that really interesting input. I think it will settle down the whole night, and then I'm sure other questions will arise, but perhaps we can keep in contact and we will see what you're doing anyway in the internet. So thank you everybody for joining us tonight for that lecture. We will kind of continue with this virtual version of our lectures for a while. Let's see how things change and if we can meet in real person very soon in the SRAUM, which we all hope, of course. Yeah, have a look at our website if you are interested in what we are doing beside lectures. Yeah, I hope to see you all very soon. And I say big thank you to Maral Pourkazemi for her talk tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.